I'm just overwhelmed with the number of resources that are here that are very much like that.
Yeah. No, it's a great program. So
Absolutely.
thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Karen, thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, I would like to introduce Senator Cyr to this podium, please.
Thank you, Chairman Joyce and members of the committee. Great to be with you. I'm State Senator Julian Cyr. I've just finished my first year in this position. And one thing that I felt really important that I do in my position, so much of the legislation that we take up on Beacon Hill comes back right down to you folks to implement at the town level, whether it's on education or a whole myriad of issues. And so many things that you folks would like to get done for education and for our students runs through Beacon Hill. And so in my first year, I made it a point to visit with every single one of the select boards or the town council in the case of Barnstable, of the 20 towns that I represent in the state senate, and 2018 is school committees, and Barnstable is the first. And I would be remiss as well if not just mentioning, especially a shout out to Caroline and to Jack, way back when in 2002 and 2003, I served as the student representative to the Nauset School Committee, and had good fun doing that. I'm actually still friends with some of the folks I worked with then. So I commend you on your public service. Be careful what you get involved in, because you could end up in my shoes. And also, I'll note that the first political activity I ever did was when I was a student at Nauset Regional High School in 2003. We had major, pretty significant cuts in funding that required a Proposition 2.5 override in the school district among the 4-member towns. If we didn't pass that, we'd eliminate 40 teaching positions, including my choir teacher at the time, some of our sports programs. And so I led an effort to convince the taxpayers in the 4 towns, having never done anything politically, to fund the school, and it was successful. And so school committee work and support of education is kind of how I got my start and close to my heart. What I wanted just to do, and I know that I have a hunch there's a lot of folks who want to talk to you tonight, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, is just give you a glimpse of some of the issues that we're grappling around with education on Beacon Hill, and then answer any questions you may have and how we can collaborate further. I do want to, the sort of largest conversation when we're talking about education as it relates to the state is state funding for education, both through the Chapter 70 formula, also in funding for transportation and other measures. In 2015, or the legislature prior to 2015, established a Foundation Budget Review Commission, which came out with a series of recommendations on how how the state can further support our public schools across the Commonwealth and each of the towns. I'll just briefly go through this, glad to answer questions if you'd like, but I think there is a real recognition that we have between a $1 and $2 billion annual funding gap in what the state provides to our schools. I'm sure you experience this every year, especially this time of year when you're starting to do your budget writing. And so what the Foundation Budget Review Commission did is say, all right, where are the gaps in funding and how do we target that? The first of those is regarding health insurance. The state feels it's really important, or this commission feels it's important, that health insurance be in line with the average General Insurance Commission, the GIC rates, that we need to do some assistance in providing health insurance to our school districts. The second is regarding special education, and that the assumed SPED costs of 15% is inadequate. The commission recommends that we go to 16%, and I think that we need to do a better job recognizing that the growing inclusion that inclusion is the preferred model, pedagogy, when it comes to education in the Commonwealth. The third is looking at support for English language learners, something that I know is important here in Barnstable, and that English language learners need to be calculated for in addition to the base rate of what schools receive. And then finally, a way to look at low income calculations and update that. certainly also looking at data collection and looking at adjustment for inflation. There's inadequate adjustments for inflation in the Chapter 770 formula. So there have been a number of ways to look at making progress in this in the budget. The Senate actually moved forward on providing supports for both health insurance and for SPED. In the House, they were able to do a little less. We did provide some assistance in the FY18 budget around health insurance for schools. I think we need to do more. My colleague, Senator Sonia Chang-Diaz, has filed a bill really to essentially to take the Foundation Budget Review Commission's recommendations and implement them. I think the key here is resources. And given that we have a $1 billion to $2 billion gap in funding from the state to municipalities, given that funding formulas of Chapter 70 is so remarkably complex, that the approach is around looking to expand the size of the pie, around divvying things up, not looking to change the divvying up of the pie, just given the complexities of this formula. I think an opportunity towards that is going to come potentially in 2019. So on the 2018 ballot, there will be a measure called the Fair Share Amendment around asking millionaires and billionaires to pay a little more. That's going to generate between $1.6 and $2 billion in resources. This is supposed to be dedicated for education and for infrastructure. Whether or not we can talk about the merits of this proposal sort of politically, I think from a polling perspective, we know this has high support, polls around 75 or 80% of support for this proposal. And so I think from anticipating what's coming is that in 2019, when the legislature reconvenes next January, we may have a new law in the books that's bringing in, through voters, that's bringing in additional resources. This is going to be our opportunity to talk about enlarging the pie. And I think we need to be prepared here on the Cape and other more rural or far-flung communities in the Commonwealth to be prepared to chime in on that. So that's sort of the preview of what I think will be happening broadly in a large way around education. I don't think we'll be doing too many significant things on education until then. Again, I think the big rub is around resources. The Senate and House did pass legislation, the Look legislation, which updated the way that we guidelines and services around English language learners, updating that, making that a little more, giving more flexibility, and being more honest about what school districts are working towards. In the budget for FY18, we did include in Chapter 70 funding nearly $5 billion, $4.74 billion in Chapter 70 funding, which is a $119 million increase, which amounts to about $30 per pupil. So more to go. I think that one issue that's important for the Cape, less so here in Barnstable, but for many of our regional districts, is including reimbursements to regional school districts for transportation of pupils. Another healthcare issue that I've heard from municipalities is looking at GIC health insurance, and that many for folks in public sector work here on Cape Cod. Primarily those options are the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group and the state GIC. If you folks have questions about the difference of those two or switching between the two, the General Services Commission, the GIC is going to be providing a hearing here in Barnstable. It is on Friday, January 26th. So if you'd like some more information on that, glad to provide that. I know increasingly a number of communities are talking about switching potentially into the GIC. So that's sort of the broader kind of policy money component of what's going on in education. I think the other topic that I wanted to briefly discuss with you folks tonight is looking at the ongoing public health crisis that we have in our communities as it relates to addiction, both in opioids and also alcohol use, and highlight some pretty compelling data that's come out that we have on substance use and specifically opioid use and morbidity and mortality here in Barnstable County. As background, prior to this position, I spent 6 years at the Department of Public Health in Massachusetts, and so have some fluency in public health interventions. Have also worked on school policies. I was a member of and led the state's commission on LGBTQ youth for a number of years and implemented many of the guidance policies, the guidance on transgender and gender nonconforming youth that is widely used across schools, the Safe Schools program. I see the superintendent nodding her head. So wanted to raise this because this really stuck out to me when I saw this and we've learned about it and would like to make sure you folks know about this information. So earlier in 2017, Barnstable County's Opiate Abuse Prevention Collaborative did an analysis, a look back of death data from 2004 to 2014, and trying to say, what can we learn of the individuals in that time frame who have died of opiate overdose? What can we tell about these individuals? Is there any common theme? And so of all these individuals in this 10-year period, we have several hundred individuals. I think it's 281. And very interestingly, of that 281 individuals in this 10-year period, 69% of these individuals who died of an opiate overdose here on Cape Cod had a high school education or less. And that's compared to, of the 18 and older population here in Barnstable County, only 31% of the population here only has a high school education or less. I think that this is very compelling information that nearly 70% of the individuals who are who in this period who died of opiate overdose of poisoning have a high school education or less, meaning that they are individuals who are not graduating out of our high schools, or if they're graduating, they're not going on to higher education, they're staying in our communities. If you look at the age data on this, 51% of these 281 individuals are in the 25 to 44 range. The other really compelling information that came out of this when looking at occupations and trades, what is there any work that's impacting individuals disproportionately? 65% of the decedents, so that 281 population number, 65% were involved in trades and service industries, and 1 in 4 are involved in construction. And so I think that this information is rather compelling. I think that it really speaks to the need for us to continue doing the work that we're doing in our schools and potentially really step up what we're doing in our high schools, in our middle schools, in our communities, given that individuals who are highest risk of opioid use and overdose, according to this data here in Barnstable County, are those who have a high school education or less, and who are involved in certain trades and services. So this is information that the Barnstable County has, and they can provide sort of a much more thorough deep dive if you're interested into this data. But I think it definitely has sparked me to want to ask you folks on the school committee and the superintendent really how we can do more to support your work in doing interventions broadly in addiction. Yes, in the opiate epidemic, we have an acute, persistent epidemic. Numbers of opiate overdose are decreasing across Massachusetts, but that is not the case here in Barnstable County. At best, they've plateaued. If anything, it continues to remain high. We are going to be taking up legislation. Governor Baker has filed legislation that the legislature intends to take up around a second bite, an opioid epidemic bill 2.0, if you will. And so we're going to be doing that in the coming fall. And so, this spring. And so certainly want to, in seeing this information, come before you, and whether it's tonight or later, really see how I can support and the Cape delegation can support the work that you folks are very much on the front lines and continue to be on the front lines and have the primary interaction with the population that remains at highest risk or among highest risk for this epidemic. So those are just some of the issues I wanted to highlight. On one end, the kind of more wonky numbers, Chapter 70 based side of this, and then also in looking at arguably the largest health issue we're facing in the region, and the most significant epidemic we've seen in this region since the HIV/AIDS epidemic. So again, I thank you for the opportunity to come before you tonight. Glad to take any questions or comments. If there's other issues I didn't touch on, please feel free to ask me. And if we want to be judicious about time tonight, glad to make sure you have my information and we can follow up on that as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Does anyone have any questions for Senator Cyr?
First of all, I want to say thank you very much for your service here to the community and to the Cape in general. I know you're in your rookie year here, and I'm sure it's been a challenge, no doubt. I'm starting my 9th year here on the school committee. I'm proud to sit here and to advocate for what we see here in our audience tonight. This is what makes us most proud as these students. Listening very carefully about what you're doing in legislature. For 9 years, we've been talking about equitable funding, Chapter 70, across essentially and especially across Cape and Island. So I hope that you're going to continue your work to push for equitable funding, because these kids sitting here in the audience, they get one high school education, and it's our job to make it the very best possible. And we can do that with help from the state, and it trickles down. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Senator, thank you for your advocacy and your work on behalf of all of our students. 2 areas I would just like to bring to your attention. One would be the circuit breaker. We're hearing as superintendents that it may not be funded at 75%, that the legislature may be looking at 65%. If that's the case, then for a district like Barnstable, that has a negative impact of over $200,000 for us. My understanding is the state is somewhat waiting on the federal government to get some clarity around that before it makes a commitment. But just so you know, as our representative, that circuit breaker funding is critical to the work that we need to do. The second area would be, as superintendents, we continue to speak to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education about the way in which they calculate economically disadvantaged students. In years past, we've been able to use the number of students who are on free and reduced lunch as a way to, that was the indicator for us. I think about 3 or 4 years ago, the department shifted to a different formula, relying on state agency, as you know, involvement by families, which for us, I know as a district, really we miss the economically disadvantaged number on the DESE profile page for Barnstable is inaccurate as a result. So anything that you could do in terms of your advocacy around making sure that we're capturing all of the students who need that type of support and extra services would be helpful.
Yeah, that is one of the primary challenges even in the position that I have, is that there's a perception of what our communities are. I represent a part of the state where people tend to know and love and in many cases vacation and spend time here, but they have a certain perspective of what that is, and that often doesn't acknowledge or doesn't sort of see the real challenges that we have from an economic and social justice perspective in our communities. The funding formulas that continue to look at property values are a real challenge. To the, I think given the complicated politics and how these formulas are derived, and then how they're sort of baked in, right? So for us to, the Cape delegation has 8 members. Even if we are able to sort of mount a coup to get something that's a little more beneficial to us, that means other places sort of lose. And so the expanding the resources perspective is, I think, one that we think will have better traction and better hope on. I think otherwise we're sort of still in the, we're working on Chapter 70, but we're still kind of stuck in this position. I think if there is a sense from the school committee or the district here in Barnstable as to, which of the Foundation Budget Review Commission recommendations would make the most difference for you folks, and which of these changes would make the most help across the Cape. I think if we can get a small working group together just to meet a handful of times across the member schools here on the Cape, we will be in better position going into 2019, where I think we'll see this action happen because of this influx in dollars. Now, a whole host of things may change, but certainly appreciate the frustration, specifically with the ESE metric there, and that it's not really capturing the need that we have. And I don't know how we fix it yet, but certainly any information that you folks can give me is really helpful in making that argument with my colleagues, and then specifically really in preparing to sink our teeth into something which I think we're going to have in 2019. And in a whole host of other issues as well that I didn't address tonight, given time, but looking at really early education and universal pre-K, how do we get that done? How do we, how do we address a whole host of issues? But I wanted to be mindful of time, and so talk about the important stuff, I guess, the money and the morbidity and mortality.
Right. Thank you. And just the third area that I would close with is, as you talked about, supporting substance prevention in communities. The way in our strategy around that work is through social emotional learning and supporting students to make healthy choices. We follow Castle's 5 competencies, and that really informs our curriculum in that area, which is emerging and developing. But as you know all too well, the pool of resources is finite, so we're often looking at where can we reallocate or shift funding from to support that work. So your conversation with us around expanding resources is extremely helpful. And again, thank you for all of your work on behalf of education.
No, you're welcome. I was disappointed that the Cape delegation, prior to me joining the legislature, was able to actually allocated $15,000 per school district on Cape Cod. Those monies actually weren't realized. The governor vetoed them, which I was really disappointed about. It's pretty short. $15,000 is pretty short money in a $40 billion budget. I think that that was an acknowledgement on behalf of the delegation of just a little bit of support for the tremendous amount that you folks are having to do. Certainly I should mention and appreciate the Barnstable Youth Commission has been at the State House and been in to see me, and I've had conversations with them, and I appreciate their work on these issues as well. But I think if there are, as we're coming into budget season, which ramps up starting in early spring, if there are specific needs or areas where you think an infusion of resources would help, please let me and my office know, and we will try our best. I know I have an appreciation for how tight everything is with the limited resources that y'all have that you're able to get done.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Senator.
Thank you again for the time.
Appreciate it. Has the committee had time to review the minutes from the December 16th meeting? Do I have a